Everyone, my name is Jessica Dodson, and I'm the Marketing Manager here at JackBe. I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation, Bringing Real-Time Intelligence into Your SharePoint Environment. So before we get started, I just want to let everybody know that we are recording today's presentation, so we'll be making the recording and the presentation available to all registrants and attendees of today's presentation. So expect that in your inbox a little later today. Also, we like to encourage open communication during these presentations, so if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the question box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We'll do our best to answer them throughout the presentation, and then, time permitting, we'll have an open Q&A. So let's go ahead and get started. Start with a little background about JackBe. JackBe is the leading solution provider of real-time business intelligence. JackBe's been globally deployed to over 100 enterprises and government agencies. Been around since about 2002. Many of you probably recognize us from the enterprise mashup space. For the last year and a half, we've really done some extensive analysis with our customers and have realized that what they really truly like to deliver is real-time operational dashboards. And a common request is to deliver those dashboards to a SharePoint environment. Today's special guest, we're joined by our partner, Statera. Today from Statera, we'll have Miguel Wood, who's a Principal and National Practice Lead for SharePoint Solutions. Miguel is somewhat of a superstar in the SharePoint space. He's got over 10 years of SharePoint expertise and experience. And he's also one of the only non-Microsoft employees who has had the accreditation of a Microsoft Certified Master of SharePoint 2010. Miguel is going to be joined by John Crupi, our Chief Technology Officer. John's former life, he's the CTO of Sun Solar Practice and also a Sun Distinguished Engineer. John's also the co-author of Core J2EE Pattern. So some of the topic areas that we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about the continuing growth of SharePoint in today's enterprise. With that growth has come some challenges, so we'll talk about some of those challenges. Talk about how Presto for SharePoint is going to be able to help you solve some of those challenges in delivering real-time operational dashboards. Then we'll talk about some of the use cases, so what our customers are trying to achieve and what they're trying to deliver to SharePoint environments. And then we'll just conclude the presentation with how Statera and JackBe can help you continue being successful with your SharePoint implementation. So at this time, I'll just go ahead and hand it over to Miguel, and he'll introduce Statera.
Thanks, Jeff.
Miguel? No
so just a little bit of information about Statera. Statera is actually celebrating 10 years of operations. And I'm not going to obviously read this slide to you, but just a couple key programs, and that's really the middle section, is that we're a national systems integrator, which basically means that we're one of a select few, about 20, 30 companies for Microsoft that are key system integrators. We're also fall under a specific special program where MCS will utilize our resources because of our expertise for Microsoft Consulting Service engagements. And the last thing is we actually have multiple folks in the VTSP program, which is the Virtual Technology Solutions Professional Program, of which I'm also a part of, which allows for us to assist Microsoft in Microsoft Technology Centers and or proof of concepts, working with clients and key strategic partners. So that's enough about Statera. I want to kind of get into the meat of the information, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about what is SharePoint. If you take a look at the next slide, please, Jess, I'll make sure I mention that. If you take a look at any Microsoft presentation that talks or explains SharePoint from a broad level, typically what will happen is you'll hear Microsoft's definition of SharePoint being the business collaboration platform for the enterprise and the web. Now, having been working with SharePoint 2010 since the early beta stages in July of 2009, I will tell you, even going all the way back to the early days of SharePoint, that anytime someone was asked, what is SharePoint, you would get at least N+1 different answers. And so what Microsoft has tried to do is move from the technology descriptions into the business descriptions, which you always see these pies, this piece of the pie that you've seen since 2007. And so you'll notice the sites and the communities and the content and the search and the insights and the composites, and then obviously Microsoft's primary design goals around the platform. Connect and empower people within your organization. Cut the cost because we're obviously on a single platform. And then rapidly respond to business needs, obviously because you're empowering the people as well. I I think a lot of that gets confused. As much as I understand the platform, most of the folks really need to take a step back and just understand that, hey, it actually was a very well or aptly named platform and technology. If I were to define it and how I talk to clients when I'm first trying to explain what SharePoint is, it is literally a platform, a place, a single point to access information within the organization, pertinent to and shared across. That doesn't mean the information has to be inside the organization. It doesn't mean that it is solely to information that the organization either buys or creates. It can be anywhere that we can access, obviously, via network. So again, it's that SharePoint is the access to information that's shared across the organizations and that single point of entry, if you will. And what I'm going to be sharing with you over the next few slides is some information that I was privy to at the Microsoft SharePoint conference. I was asked by the product group to review some information. And this information is extremely timely. All the information that came from about 510 organizations, from mid-market all the way up to enterprise and global companies. This information or this research was done by Forrester Research, which many of you probably have heard of before. And all this information was gathered in July 2011, and so that's only about 90 days ago. This was not completed and only released publicly about 3 weeks ago. But I brought out some of the key information from this so that we can kind of understand exactly where SharePoint is worldwide. There's going to be some negative stuff in here as well as positive. So again, that's the good thing, is to find out where the pluses and minuses are when adopting a technology like this. So the first slide that you're looking at here is, of course, SharePoint 2010 adoption. Now, I want to make sure that everyone is aware that SharePoint 2010, the current platform, was released back in May of 2010. And previous to that, we had SharePoint 2007, and previous to that, obviously, 2003. I'm not going all the way back to 2001 because there was a significant platform change in 2001 and 2003. But what I want you to key in on is that we've only been out the door for just over a year, and yet we see that we have a 57%. So this is all folks, all 510 of these organizations have SharePoint in their enterprise. 57% of them are running SharePoint Server 2010. I want to make sure I key in on a couple differences here, because obviously in the SharePoint realm of things, if we get into the additions and versions and so forth, we have what we sometimes refer to as the free versions, the what used to be called Windows SharePoint Services. And in 2010, we call it SharePoint Foundation. That is not included in this 57%. This 57% is the SharePoint Server. So this would be really the licensed versions of SharePoint 2010, both standard and enterprise. The free versions, or the WSS and or SharePoint Foundation 2010, are all grouped in that third 25% bucket, and then we drop off to online, BPOS, which was BPOS was on the 2007 platform, and Office 365 is on the 2010. I combined those also into one bucket, which is the 13%. What I want you to notice is that only after a year after adoption, we're within 8% of overtaking all the 2007 implementations of SharePoint Server. Previously, it was called MOS, or Office SharePoint Server. Now it's just simply called SharePoint Server. So this is just to give you another perspective on how fast this is growing. The number of users, if we were to linearize them since release in May of 2010 to today, the number of users of SharePoint is growing globally at a rate of about 20,000 per day. So many people are obviously adopting this platform. It's still, I can tell you from a consulting perspective, from seeing very, very large organizations and very small organizations across the board, it's just a very, very rapid growth of the platform. And you'll hear me refer to it as a platform rather than an application, because it is truly a platform rather than a install and it's going to fix all your problems. And we'll get to that in just a few.
Miguel, this is John Crupi. So a few people are asking, do you see that the rate at which 2010 moving, because you've been doing SharePoint for quite a while, what do you attribute its rapid pace to compared to the features and characteristics it has versus 2007?
That's a good question. So we've seen refinements and or obviously improvements on several of the key areas. I will tell you that Microsoft is very good at the marketing game. I will definitely see that. When I say that, I want to be very clear that what that means is SharePoint is not it's not a point solution. And because it's not a point solution, if you went back and remember that pie that we talked about on my first slide about what is SharePoint, and you'll see this in the next slide, that people are deploying SharePoint for different reasons. And that's a good thing, because what they should be keying in on, of course, is what is their goal, their organizational goals, and what's their business goals. I think the other issue, or one of the things that's driving such a very rapid adoption of this version is that we're actually now talking on the .NET, arguably on version 2 or version 3. So it's definitely more of a stable platform. It doesn't mean that that is perfect, but it is a very, very stable platform if you do it right. The other challenge, however, and we're going to get to some challenges in a couple slides, is that it's extremely broad. So you're going to hear a couple things that, to those people who are asking those questions, you're also going to hear a couple ideas as far as how do I make my deployment, my implementation successful within my organization. Does that answer a couple of those questions? Were there any other questions?
Yeah, that's good so far. Thanks.
Yes, no worries. So this one is a little bit more difficult to, I hope everyone can see this well. I tried to put this visually and then also break it down in numbers. So just to kind of put this in perspective, the orange is the very satisfied. The darker blue is the satisfied. So if you combine both the orange and the blue, that's your satisfied index. And what I've done is I've taken all 6 of those areas, the insights, or the pieces of the pie, if you will, the insights, the social, the search, content, sites, and collaboration, and then broken them down by the area of functionality within the platform. I've added one additional one because I think I'm trying to reinforce that SharePoint is a platform meant to be molded and configured for your organizational goals. It is not, Microsoft doesn't know your business or your organization, so it's meant to be molded, and typically we're going to do that with either custom code or third-party solutions or things on top of the platform, basically. The red is very important because that shows how, whether they're planning to deploy that area of functionality. And then the yellow would be no plans to deploy, and then the light blue would be dissatisfied. You'll notice that most of the dissatisfied, the highest one is search, and the second being social. The search actually kind of caught me off guard. The social definitely did not catch me off guard because people are still learning about social capabilities within enterprises, and I will tell you, most management really hasn't grasped what that means and what direction they want to go. They haven't thought about it strategically, and honestly, they're actually having difficulty finding business value if they don't understand it very well. The rest of it's under 10% or less. But I wanted to go ahead and of course, since SharePoint's been around for so long, it's obviously known as a collaboration platform. So it's no surprise that that's the highest, and the next being portals and intranets, and then obviously enterprise content management. What I want to key in on, I just talked about social, but I want to key in on that insights. So insights, if you take a look at the percentage there, we're looking at a combination of only 18% satisfaction, but arguably close to the largest of planning to deploy. And what insights, by the way, means is that we're looking into quantitative information within the organization, whether that be in a data warehouse, whether that be sales, whether that be, or analyzing basically our operations and exposing that to the user. Now, I know that from classic business intelligence, because that's primarily my background, from classic business intelligence, there's a lot of work that needs to occur in the classic business intelligence methodology before we can even go ahead and mine that data or present that data and derive decision-making capabilities from that data. Typically what that means is I have to take all my transactional data, package it up, transform it, and load it into a very in a system, a data warehouse that allows for reading and analyzing that data very quickly. One of the things that is challenging about that is most of the time those type of solutions restrict us from getting real-time business intelligence, real-time data. And we're going to talk, obviously, about that in just a few. Now, after seeing this slide, I hope you guys, again, this is a very, very good slide. You see some negatives here, definitely on the dissatisfied. Again, remember, this is 510 organizations that all have SharePoint deployed. There is one more thing I need to make sure that you're aware of. This is actually combining all the platforms, so not just SharePoint 2010 on this one, which was a little bit, I had to go back and check my facts on this one to make sure that that was correct. So that also may play a little bit in the numbers.
Miguel, what about BPM? Would you put BPM under the BI side or the composite application side?
So BPM actually would typically fall under composite applications. And the reason I say BPM is we're typically talking more than just a simple workflows within SharePoint Designer. If I go anything beyond workflows in SharePoint Designer, that would either become custom code with Visual Studio or a third-party solution, either workflow solution or BPM. So that is actually classified, and you'll actually see how I classified composite or third-party solutions here in a couple slides.
Great, Miguel. So now we want to take the content of this slide and we want to conduct a poll real quick to give you some sense of people's interest or where they are in terms of this strategy. So I have about 60 seconds here. If you could just fill in, select one or more, which are the most important parts of your SharePoint strategy. Okay, we have about a quarter of you guys voting in. Collaboration is in the lead by a nose. Okay, about another 10, 15 seconds. You want to make a prediction, Miguel, which will be the winner of this poll?
Collaboration or sites, either one of those two is always going to be typically the winner.
Okay, 78% voted, just a few more.
Now that I've said that, everyone's going to go for like insights or something, right?
Great. Well, there you have it. Collaboration at 77%. Content management, of course, we know that that's always a large part. And it looks like sites, of course, and insights are, especially insights at 48%, that's pretty high, which is a good part of the strategy.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I would love to see that even go further into search and social. I would argue that we'll obviously have competing platforms in the search, and this is Microsoft's primary enterprise search platform. But the social, I will tell you, I've got some very, very large global clients that are struggling with their social strategy and actually leaning on the third-party products to actually bring that to fruition within the organizations.
Okay, great. So it's good. The survey definitely represents what we're going to cover and where people's interests lie.
That's a good thing to know. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about the negatives. Again, this is still coming from the same research, July 2011, and I will probably chime in with some of my personal insight from my consulting experience, and just after this in just a bit. So the deployment challenges. What I want you to key in on is that we've got 59% of the organizations, the 510 organizations that were surveyed, say that they were able to deploy SharePoint at the expected pace. In other words, what I translate that to mean is that their project schedule actually was met. However, 41%, the other 41% had some type of deployment challenge in a slower than expected schedule. Now, I want to be clear, what you're going to see here in the cause of the slow deployment down below in our graph is not a one answer. It's select all that apply. So what why I'm saying that is the number one there at 59% is the technical issues. However, if you take a look at the fourth one at 28%, the yellow bar, that's actually saying that their challenge of the cause for slow deployment was skill sets and talent. And just as an example, I would argue that if you don't have the skill sets and talent, you would probably attribute that to a technical challenge as well. So they could have, a lot of these could have selected multiples here. But it definitely just simply goes to technical. But I want you to key in. Most of us think of SharePoint as this application-based, this platform, this technology. The number two thing really has very little to do with technology, and it's lack of governance. In other words, what are my business processes around working with this technology? What is my strategy? And again, I would argue that this is typically the case around social and engaging social and or other things. And then it goes down to functional issues, slow user adoption, because you're changing the way people typically work, funding, and then the last one being other. All right, and again, please let us know if there are any questions, and I'll go ahead and answer those as I can. So going into third-party augmentation really quick, 57% of all 510 deployments utilize some third-party tool on top of SharePoint. So this is where I talked about earlier, that BPM or workflow or social capabilities or even operational, administrative, and management support would be followed into those third-party tools. So of that 57%, then breaking down that 57%, 44% of those third-party tools were part of the original strategy of the implementation for the SharePoint platform. 38% of those third-party tool additions were because they found that the SharePoint native capabilities did not meet requirements. And last but not least, 16% had changed their original strategy or changed their original scope and therefore relied on or looked to third-party tools to implement their business goals, their business requirements. So before I turn it back over to John and let him show you some very cool stuff, what does this mean from an overall perspective? Is SharePoint meeting the expectations of these organizations, these global organizations? So it's interesting because we're almost the same, but just slightly different. 79% of the IT personnel within an organization, the IT departments, say that the SharePoint platform is meeting the expectations that they had of the SharePoint platform. From a business or organizational management leadership perspective, 73% are saying that the SharePoint platform is meeting the expectations. So very, very close there at, almost 80%, almost three-quarters there, that SharePoint is meeting expectations. I would consider that to be, especially in IT and seeing some of the projects and other technologies, I would expect that to be a success, especially when you're taking a look at a platform that you may not have all the information about.
Miguel, a few people are asking, does this include 2010?
Yes, this does.
Okay.
This includes, so these last few were actually all SharePoint. So be aware that we may actually see some, that actually challenged me. So I actually wrote back to the two VPs responsible for this at Forrester Research. And I said, I'd love to know the numbers for just SharePoint 2010 rather than all SharePoint deployments. Because I would argue that, if you're trying to do BI and Insights with SharePoint 2003, it is a completely different experience than obviously working with 2010.
And that makes a lot of sense. We're seeing the same thing anecdotally, but from a vendor's perspective, the happier these organizations are with SharePoint, the more SharePoint will grow inside the enterprise, and that's what we're seeing is rapid growth, which is part of the reason why we're talking today, because if your organization is going to spend more and more time within SharePoint, then we have to give them the tools and the technology to be able to do things that they haven't been able to do before in, say, their existing portals.
And you mentioned something there, and of course it's all based on economy, right? It's all based on, are we getting a heck of a lot of value for what we have? And of course the utopia, that golden or brass ring that I think most organizations are looking for, is to minimize the number of solutions that the users have to use to get their job done. And so SharePoint is a possibility, or definitely a contributor to bringing all of that information to one place and possibly even actions to get my job done. And therefore, the more I can put on the platform that meets the business goals. I want to be clear here that SharePoint's not the answer for everything, but that can meet the business goals, then obviously the return for the business and the efficiency of the business gets extremely high, and it's exponential growth after a while.
And that's a great place to turn it over to talk about how we're helping customers with our Presto for SharePoint solution. but also talk about some of the most important things that you talked about, which is security and governance. As SharePoint instances come up, many of them come up pretty organically in an organization, but as you have more and more of these instances, there's a lot more tendency to apply governance and security and to centralize management. So in reality, we really have to accelerate the security and governance from here so that people can share and collaborate and take advantage of more enterprise-grade information.
Yeah, it definitely becomes more important.
So now what we want to do is, thanks Miguel very much, we'll open it up at the end for more questions. But now we want to talk about from our side what we're seeing in terms of providing solutions for SharePoint customers. And we're really talking about providing real-time operational dashboards to our customers. And that's because, as we said before, Miguel said, the use of SharePoint is growing exponentially, but the things that you can do in SharePoint we just dreamed about years ago to be able to do, because technology has caught up. There's tremendous amount of ease of use and self-service and collaboration built into SharePoint. So it makes it a perfect platform for us to be able to deliver to. And when we deliver, we really deliver our applications and our dashboards so that users can take advantage of the tooling inside, so they can do a lot more customization and do-it-yourself and self-service type creation. So I want to get into that and tell you a little bit about how we do that and how we're solving some of these problems. So we believe Presto is the fastest way to help deliver real-time intelligence to the SharePoint environment. And we do that because, as we said, we take the self-service assembly side of things, the self-service that's deeply ingrained with SharePoint, and all the collaborative nature in SharePoint, but we really apply the real-time enterprise information component. And this is what we think is one of our big key differentiators. If you look at where SharePoint and how it's being used, the most often it's just being used as little work groups or departmental and putting information in, mostly as a content management. But as time goes on, there's more and more information that's actually being stored in SharePoint, especially in SharePoint lists. But then organizations, probably many of yours, are building the next generation applications inside SharePoint. Now, these aren't just small applications. These are new generation HR applications, and they're not just HR applications that are pulling from a single system like PeopleSoft. They could be pulling from many systems. So what we see, and this is why we're jointly doing this webinar, there's a tremendous opportunity to provide a next generation of tooling and product to help accelerate solution providers like Miguel, so that we can take a lot of the low-level plumbing that we traditionally had to do and make that essentially point and click so that we can build applications much faster for you. Okay, so how do we do this? And when we talk about SharePoint, and Miguel said it right, SharePoint it's different, really. It's a platform, and it's truly a platform both from a source of information and a destination of information. So if you think that in the future, many of us will be doing a significant amount of work when we're in the office in SharePoint, you have to think about SharePoint as not just a place where we work, but also a source of information. And it's probably a well-kept secret that a lot of organizations rely on mission-critical applications that have information in SharePoint lists. It's so easy to put information in. It's almost the next generation of enterprise access, if you think of it that way. That I can have an enterprise database with the ease of access, but in SharePoint, not only that, I can create things quickly, but I can share it in my department. So and we'll demonstrate this, before you know it, SharePoint list becomes this departmental database that has a lot of information, but it becomes siloed, so we need to be able to share it. Well, it's just a single source of information. As we're building up the capabilities of our platform and what we're providing to our customers, they want to take this information and integrate it into other enterprise information. And this is really the big trend and why we're talking to you today. We think that the world, especially when it comes to SharePoint, the enterprise applications and real-time business intelligence will really be based on direct connect into many of these systems that you see here now. We're talking about existing BI systems, data warehouses, marts and cubes, and also more of the transactional type systems, the SAP, the CRM, even Salesforce type systems. And a lot of this is historical, but a lot of it is happening very quickly. when we talk about real time, we're talking about being able to respond to things when they happen. May not be to the second or to the minute, but it could be every 5 minutes. But the business user needs to know when things change because that's how they make their decisions. Now, all of a sudden, we need intelligence and dashboards that has information coming from all these systems behind the firewall and SaaS, and then you bring in Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and all the social media. IT, can't sleep at night because they have the security and governance nightmare. How are we going to allow this information to flow and let our business do their job, but how do we put security and governance around it? That's really what this is all about. How do we connect into these systems directly? How do we use it as the authoritative source of information, so not making copies of it where you don't need to, and how do you move it into dashboards very quickly so you have this real-time view of your enterprise? Well, you have to, if you're going to do this, you have to do it in a few ways. You have to make it easier to get the information in. As we said with Presto, we really want to be able to treat everything as an information source, not just consuming information, but also being able to write it back. And you'll see the different types of services and service types we have here, whether it's news feeds or web services, databases. Excel, of course, is a huge source of information. SharePoint List is a very big source, so we are able to register that into Presto and be able to treat it as a source of information from both reading and writing. So this is a little generic in the terms of type of services that we consume, but we're talking, when we're talking web services, we're talking the big ERPs, the big CRMs, Salesforce, all the standard major ISVs now support some sort of web service interface, which will be called from a technical perspective either REST or WSDL. So, and many of them have database access too. So being able to point, click, and have access to this information is the first stage of being able to do this. The second is that we want to be able to take the information and put it together quickly, and we call that mashing it up. The reason why we call it mashing is because it has more of a real-time nature, putting things together on the fly. It's specifically not referred to as integration by us or the analysts because integration is more of a coding IT type effort. From a mashing perspective, we want to be able to put the data, the real-time information in front of the analyst, in front of the knowledge worker or power user, and allow them to put the data together as they need it so they can build their dashboard. Why are we able to do this now? We're able to do it because we have strong security and governance so that we can connect into these systems securely. We have the tooling, so the browsers are now very powerful, and we can do things in the browsers that just 5 years ago we could just about do on the desktop. And we show the people who are using this information, the information as it's happening. This is a key distinction, is the tooling today is real time in that you're looking at information as you're putting it together. So it's very easy for people who understand the data to look at it, make sense of it, put it together without having to have huge semantic libraries or a tremendous amount of data modeling and semantic libraries that are put together in advance. It's much like what they do with Excel spreadsheets now, but now they do it from an information perspective. And the last is that we want to be able to take this information and put it together in dashboards quickly and publish it right out to SharePoint. So this is what we said, is that SharePoint's not only a destination, but the source. But we want to be able to create things quickly and publish it out through a single click so that what we create, and this could be developers creating things, it could be business analysts, it could even be really technically savvy power users, are able to create these dashboards in real time and publish them out and have access to the real-time data. So now what we want to do is we want to give you a demonstration of this. And I think the way we'll do it is we'll do it more from a top-down perspective, where we're going to show you how the views are created, or the informational views are created from data, from different sources, and how easily they can be pushed into a SharePoint instance. Okay? So we're going to switch screens here, and we'll be showing you this. And a lot of what we do here is 100% live and on demand. We do some things in advance to speed it up, but as we go and we demonstrate, we want to show you how we're working with real data on real systems and real information. Okay? So here we go. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to show you information that's been registered into Presto. We're going to show you some database information. that's in. And this actually happens to be real data that's from the broadband initiative out there, where the government is funding broadband initiatives throughout the country. And you see this information. Now, what's happening behind the scenes here is this is a demonstration of Presto running on the cloud so that we can show you public information. And the database is also on the cloud. So everything that we're doing is running somewhere out there on the cloud and is running in real time. So as data changes, you'll see the change immediately as it gets refreshed. And then you'll be able to also create the views on the information. So let's create some views here. And here's a view that is created. This is a geospatial view. And the way that Presto handles it is it really allows you to quickly put different visualizations in view on the information. Although we said that we can write back information, we also allow you to very quickly visualize that information that you have in front of you. So we're able to see this information in different ways. We're able to see this pie chart that shows you the distribution of information. And we're able to quickly add another view here. Because what I want to do is I want to create multiple views and put them in a dashboard and push them out to SharePoint. Okay. So next, we'll choose one of our nicer looking views here, the pyramid. And what's happening now is we're pulling out informational fields as we are building this. Now, if you click on Show Data there, real quick, behind the scenes, you could always look at the information to see the information you're working with. But then as you're going to pull out the field, because a lot of these fields actually in the enterprise are not named appropriately. So you can not only find out what the fields mean, but you could also rename the field so it makes more sense to you when you're visualizing it. You can do all the sorts of things such as captions and titles, everything you need to make it more intuitive. And as you're doing this, you're essentially creating another view. Now, when we go in, we have a bunch of options here. So the world is actually moving towards, if you're looking at this now, moving from the concept of pixel-perfect reports to almost pixel-perfect dashboards. This is the big trend. Some analysts call this extreme dashboarding, where we can do things that traditionally we just had to use for like doing crystal reports, where we can get information that looks beautiful. Now we can do it in the way of dashboards so that we can see information very aesthetic and gives you a lot of information, all visually, and is real time. So as the data is changing, so is the visualization. So we're going to give this another name here. We're going to name these different views, and this allows us to have reuse. So if you're sharing information with others, you don't just share the informational source, you're sharing the views of information so they can understand it. Okay, so we're going to see this now, and then we're going to put it all together for you and push it out into SharePoint. All right, so here's the funding map here. And this is really just point-click configuration. You're able to label the fields, all the things you're used to. A lot of this has to do with just making the data easier to understand, reducing the complexity of the information, because you could be getting it from some really old legacy information or just some information that was never really designed initially to be exposed. So we have to make it intuitive and easy to understand. We have the ability to add different themes and colors. Everything can be customized to your color scheme. So there you see the different views of the information there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to arrange this in more of a dashboard view, and we're going to push it out. And a dashboard view is really just, it's essentially, for all intents and purposes, it's a layout of information. And it may be showing you the same information in different views, or it could be showing you disparate information in different views. Why this is important now, it's not just important for destinations such as SharePoint, but the whole tablet market is exploding, because the whole concept of operational dashboards and the real estate that you have available really lends itself to these types of real-time dashboards. Okay, so what we're doing is we're taking all those views and we're putting it together into an app. Packaging it up is another way of saying it. And everything here is pretty real-time. So we're working on a real-time system and building on a real-time system. We don't have to compile and package and offload it to somewhere else. As soon as it's created and the permissions are assigned, it's available for use. We're going to open it up and see what it looks like. And we always keep our fingers crossed because we're doing this over the net. There's nothing that we do specific for these webinars. And now what we're going to do is see that little publish there. You're able to publish this to SharePoint. You'll see we have a concept of an app depot, which is like an app store, essentially for all intents and purposes, internal app store. But we make it so that you can just point, click, and push it out to SharePoint. So let's see what that looks like. We're configuring it now. And here's the key part. The IT organization typically is the one who registers the SharePoint instances or farms. So this doesn't just happen. I know that a lot of people get nervous in IT organizations that they don't want this to go awry. They don't want people just pulling data from wherever and pushing it out to wherever. So this is completely secure and governed. It means that IT is the one who you can see registers a SharePoint server that's to be registered up top. You can have server farms. Whatever you have in your SharePoint environment could be done by the department or could be done by IT, depending on your security and governance. Okay, and in a single click here, we chose the page, and it's going to be pushed out. Now it puts us into SharePoint, a different instance of SharePoint running somewhere, and we'll see the dashboard. And there's a lot of clapping going on behind the scenes that you don't hear, but this is literally how it works. Now, for many of you on the SharePoint side here, wondering about the technology, everything we use underneath is standards-based. We're using JavaScript, HTML5. But what happens on the fly is these are automatically, as we like to say, converted into native web parts. So that means that these get sent over to SharePoint and are rendered in real time, but are also converted into native web parts, which means that this information actually can participate, and these different web parts can participate with other web parts that you have in your environment. Okay, so we have different timers on here. We're going to look to see if any of the information refreshes. Because we said it's live information, the information could change at any point in time, which means that if we look closely and any changes happen, we'll give it a few seconds to see here. Then we'll see a change in the information. If we don't get the change, because updates have just been made recently, then we'll do a refresh. But it really all depends on how our network is performing here. Okay? All right, let's see here. We want to do a refresh, or are we okay? All right, so we'll move on here, and I want to show you underneath all of this how we're able to go and take the information, and we're able to go and not only take this directly from the sources, but we're able to go and make it and form it into the types of information we need. So let me go and pull this up here, and you'll see what I'm going to show you here is wires. Now, a lot of you asked about governance and being able to use things. Everything I'm looking at here is in the browser and is delivered to me on demand. Here's a list of all the different services and mashups that have been registered in the system. What you're looking here is a visual mashup of information. Now, when I log into the system, I only see the services and informational sources that I have access to. At any point in time, if I was revoked access to any of these, it would immediately take effect, and I would no longer have any access to this information. But what we're really trying to do here is we're really trying to adhere to the way that organizations work. This is an example where an HR organization took information that they track their employees internally in Excel, and they also, the HR and performance management group has all the information about the skill levels that their employees have, and they keep it in a SharePoint list. So this grows dramatically, as you can imagine, as the more skills increase and the more employees come in. So what they have to do, the problem that they had was, we're tracking different employees, but we need their skill levels to put them on projects, but we also need some background information, which is actually stored in our SAP HR system. So what this does here, this mashup goes and takes the information that I have, and I'm tracking my employees, and it goes and looks in my SharePoint instance that has my HR data and looks for those employees. And I'll just show you all the information here to show you this is really working. you'll see there's a ton of information that's coming back. And what I do is I join that together. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to put the data together for those employees with their HR information, because I need some of that along with their skill levels. And you see I have a lot of information. You can't even show it visually here. Once I join it together, this is the key, is I want to be able to reduce the amount of information so that it only shows the information I need. And what that really means is, from a visual perspective, is I'm really only interested in the employee's name and a birth date and skill levels, but I'm also interested in the number of children they have and their city and country of birth. And I need this information for the type of project. So as you can imagine, as skill levels change and as the number of children and the place of birth, why they need number of children for this application, I don't know. What we get out of this whole thing behind the scenes is we can go and publish this here into SharePoint, just like we were showing before. And the way it's done is I'll take this information that was just created, it becomes live, and I turn it into essentially an app. And this app that I have will follow the same process. So just to make sure everyone understands the way this is moving, we're moving from, we showed you from the top down where I'm taking apps that have been created, and now we're showing you how we do this when we actually go and take data that we have and we put it, we give it to you so that you can push it out as a UI. So here I am, I have my UI and my app. I'm going to save this out as a view here. I'll save it. Oops, I already did that one before. Okay, and then once it's saved for me, I'll go and create an app on this, and I'll show you all the way up to where I configure it. I have a bunch of different views on it. I'll take the last one I created, and actually bar chart is there too, and I'll look at what this looks like as an app with two views. So it's going, getting the data. There's caching and snapshotting that we have behind the scenes to optimize information, but ultimately it's showing you the real-time information as it's happening. And I'll go finish this out. It looks like I'm locked up a little bit. Okay, I'll give this a name. Finish it up. All right, and then when I have it here, then now I've created an app, just like we showed before. The difference is that this is pulling from all those different systems and putting it together on the fly and giving me the information I need. And then I'll take this, and you'll see I just showed the number of children, and I showed that there. Then I can go through the same process and choose my SharePoint server and push it out and do the same process. So basically, this is a quick tutorial about going from the top down, where you have used an app you want to put together and push out to SharePoint, and also from the perspective of putting data together and then being able to push that app out into SharePoint. Okay, so now we're going to turn it back to the presentation in the next 10 minutes to finish it up and try to give you some examples of how this is being used in organizations to give you an idea of how it could be used in your organization. So I want to talk about Qualcomm. Qualcomm, of course, is a high-tech manufacturing company. They make extremely complicated chips, and there's a huge QA process that results in the chips and development and manufacturing. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of information that's flowing about testing, about production, QA, manufacturing. A lot of this information is not just used internally, it has to be shared with their partners. So they needed a way to take all this information that's always changing and put it together very quickly so they have these real-time dashboards. So being able to pull from systems like composite software, they had a data warehouse where they have their information, a bunch of spreadsheets that are always changing. They wanted to rapidly assemble the apps, literally have the engineers put the apps together and publish the apps out as a way of reporting how they're doing either from a quality or manufacturing or supply chain perspective. And those apps actually were put together in dashboards by the engineers and some business analysts and delivered out to SharePoint and LifeRay. And that's the thing here that we're trying to get across, is that although many of you are looking at this from a SharePoint perspective, what we have to do, and probably in your organization, is that it's not only SharePoint. SharePoint is growing like crazy, but SharePoint is going to be a very important destination, but not the only one. So everything that we're building today and showing you gets pushed out through standards as a native web part, but can also run as a native portlet and can also run on mobile devices with HTML5. You don't have to redevelop for every platform because SharePoint developers are expensive, so you want to make sure you get the best ones and the best architects, but you want to be able to take advantage of what they build so that it can run on other platforms. Okay, next one is a bank that monitors the performance of the banks and how the customer service functions. Now, here's the bank, and they're all throughout Latin America, and they are looking at how customers are being served across all their different banks, and they're looking at all different information. Well, you can imagine the information is captured in a bunch of different systems, everything from many different databases, again, to web services that have been built. There's key performance indicators and scorecards that they're being measured against. And everything that's coming together in these dashboards isn't looking at just a small segment of information, actually mashing it up and correlating it to other parts, higher level scorecards very easily, and being able to put into dashboards that are not just used by operators and managers, but are also go all the way up to the CIO so that they can look at the business. And then I'll give you one more here, which I think will give you an idea of how this can actually be used in a public-facing environment. And this is something that was done, and this was actually one of the biggest SharePoint 2010 installations, new installations that was public-facing. And it's part of the stimulus program. And the recovery board basically wanted a way to take information that was being reported every quarter, about the $700 billion that was being used for stimulus, and they wanted to make it available on recovery.gov. Recovery.gov is running on SharePoint 2010 on the cloud, and behind the scenes, they have all this information from D&B data. They have data warehouses that have information, and they wanted to do two things. They wanted to make information available for the general public to be able to look at any spending at any point in time in any congressional district or county. They also wanted them to be able to create these self-service apps. And by self-service app, they wanted to be able to literally point and click and enter in your information for your congressional district right on that site, and which is running SharePoint, and be able to say, okay, I really like this app, and this is my congressional district. It's real-time information, so as new contracts come in, I see it, and make it available so that essentially people can just take it and put it wherever they want through a script tag, all customized. And now you have something, if you think about it, that was built in SharePoint, public-facing, customized by literally anybody who can have access to it, which is anyone, and take it and put it into different websites. So we just did a quick search and just came up with, it was in some senator sites, it was in different state sites, and no help from us. It was all self-service and done. Who knows, maybe Tom Udell actually did it himself and put it in his New Mexico site. So this is really the design tenet here. Is we really want to make it easy. So easy, in fact, that Dell is looking to do the same thing for their 120,000 employees. They're building a new generation HR portal, which is looking at portal differently. It's not taking it and pre-arranging and pre-prescribing all the content and information you have, like many of us were used to in portals. What it's doing is it's taking its major systems that it has, including OBIEE from Oracle, Taleo, PeopleSoft, and taking public feeds, and it's creating apps on top of these and making them available in an App Store type concept within the HR portal. Now, these apps aren't just read-only apps. They're also transactional apps that you can go and register for online courses, has organizational information in it. You can see the performance of the organization and everything that could monitor the network performance that you may be interested into, monitoring your friends within the organization to see what research they're doing. All this is being built incrementally in small pieces and assembled together, many by the end users, to be able to create these dashboards. So it's really, the opportunities are pretty vast and wide here in the different types of use cases that you can solve. But if you're looking at really what's your fit, a lot of this has to do with information that's always changing. information from disparate systems that have to be put together to solve your problem. And there's a very collaborative and sharing type environment where you're not just making decisions yourself, you need to have others make decisions along with you. Okay, so I'm going to hand it back over to Jess. We're just about done here, and she's going to finish up, and if we have any questions that have come in, then we'll answer them in the next few minutes.
Thanks, John. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank John and also Miguel for your time. We really appreciate you taking the hour with us and explaining the background about SharePoint's growth and where it's headed, and we're excited about our partnership and being able to provide joint opportunities for the market. Miguel, did you have any concluding thoughts that you'd like to share?
No, I think this is really good. I hope if there are any questions, of course, I do want to make sure people have my contact info, miguel.wood@statera.com. Feel free to drop me a line if you do have any questions or follow-ups. And of course, please visit us at statera.com if you believe we can assist you in anything that you need.
Thanks, Miguel. And also, from our perspective, we offer a free trial edition of our Presto for SharePoint offering. It's available at JackBe.com/dev. It's a 90-day trial, so we encourage everyone to visit the website and download it, play around with it, and then if you have any questions, you can always contact us on JackBe.com. So we appreciate your time today. Thanks again, and we'll see you again soon.